Excellent. Good. So, Safaria. It is just very slow, our connection this morning. Maybe because it snowed. I don't know. But here we are. Okay. Safaria. We're going to find Shabbat 107. And then we can begin. It's aggravating. I had it up and it just froze, and I had to restart the whole thing. So the question is, what does God do with himself? How does God spend his day? That is the parable. That is the metaphor that we are looking at. Okay, so you know what? You'll have to take my word for it because I don't want to waste any more time of a very short class. Omar Rav Yehuda, Omar Rav. Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav, Yud Beit Sha'ot Havi Hayom. The day is 12 hours long. In other words, the Jewish day from sunrise to sunset is divided into 12 equal sections. Now, in the summer, those sections are longer. In the winter, they are shorter. They are relative hours, the time from sunrise to sunset. So the day is divided into 12 hours. Gimel Shot Rishonot Yoshev v'Kadosh Baruch Hu v'Osek b'Torah. What does God do the first 3 hours? He studies Torah, which means to say that what we need to begin the day with, as we are doing here, is with the study of Torah. Shniot Yoshev v'Dan et kol olam kulo. The second set of the 3 hours, God judges the whole world. On the third set of hours, God sustains the whole world from the horns of the Re'im, which is a huge creature, Vad Beitze Kinim, to the eggs of lice, which are very, very, very small. And in other words, that what does God do with his days? So the most important priority of God is the study of Torah, because from Torah everything good comes. Hold on, let me put on my mask. We have a visitor. The second hours of the day. The second hours of the day, God is judging the world because there has to be justice in the world. And last of all, God sustains the whole world. Now, there is a version of Talmud that says, what does God do the fourth part of the day? And there's a reading that says that he spends his time making shidduchim. In other words, he spends his time finding ways for people to match up people, because only God can truly match people well. And because we see that many matches are indeed quiet. You wouldn't think of them yourself, and nevertheless they work. There are a lot of stories like that. So later in the Talmud, we'll hear the story of the Roman noblewoman who thought she could do better than God at making matches, and we'll come to that story. A very interesting one, I believe it is in Tractate Kiddushin. And here we finally got our internet working properly. So I'm going to share the screen with you. Okay. 107A.
What about the member of our shul that wants to do shidduchim?
Who's that?
The dating.
Yes. So maybe the computer can be a vehicle for God's. Okay. Here we are. Okay. Anyways, so that was that, and now we're going to move on to a story, a curious one, I think.
Rabbi, what about the first story?
No, we did it. We went through it.
I know, but are there any metaphor? Is that a metaphor?
Of course, it's a metaphor. In other words, the
Okay.
priorities should be without Torah, there can be no justice. And afterwards, justice is important. When you have justice, you have sustenance. Yes. So let me elaborate. In other words, the order what God does is Torah, justice, and sustenance. Because if there's no rule of law, and no justice, and no sense of fairness, there's no sustenance. There is no the people won't trust each other. People won't work together. Mistrust between people is what causes economic collapses. It's very interesting. Rabbi Chanan Wasserman, who was martyred in Rosh Yeshiva of Barnovich, the student of Rabbi Chaim Brisker, who was martyred in Kovna in 1941 when the Germans invaded, was one of the greatest Talmud scholars of the 20th century. And I knew his son. So Rabbi Chanan Wasserman wrote in one of his letters that he wrote to the Jewish community. Okay, now I can take off my mask. Rabbi Chanan Wasserman wrote something very interesting. He talked about the Great Depression. He says, normally when we have economic depressions, where do they come from? The economic depression comes from if there's a war, if there's a famine, if there's a hurricane, and the means of production are destroyed. But he said of the Great Depression, it's a strange thing. There's no wars. The fields are full of produce. The factories are full of raw materials and fuel and can produce things. The people are ready and able to work. Transportation links are open, yet everyone's starving and nothing's working. And he says, you know why? Because in our generation, we've forgotten the idea that God is created in man's image, that man is created in God's image. And because we forgot that man is created in God's image, we no longer see anything unifying human beings, and we have lost trust in each other. Because we don't trust each other, because we don't see the divinity in each other, and we adopted all these isms. At the time was communism and fascism that all worship the human being and the human being's power. We've ceased trusting in each other, and without trust, there can be no commerce. Without trust, there can be no business. Indeed, one of the things that made the Depression so bad is that as soon as it started, every country raised its tariff barriers and made it harder for people to trade with each other. Every country mistrusted the other. Every group within society mistrusted the other. And that is what caused the Great Depression to be so bad. So Rabbi Chanan was onto something. And it's only when people see that they can trust each other, because they see that we share a common spark of divinity, can the world work. And therefore, first there's Torah, then there's justice, and only then can the world be sustained. That is the parable.
Very good.
Okay. And now here's a story. Shmuel v'Karna have a yosa aguda de Nahar Malka. So, see, I switched it to the side by side, and I got to go all the way down.
Shmuel, you mean like our Shmuel?
No, this is Shmuel. There are two great Talmud sages, and there are two great Talmud sages who lived in Bavel. And this is when Rav came to Bavel. Shmuel was younger, but Rav came later. Shmuel and Rav were both the youngest students of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, of Rabbi Yehuda of Rebbe, of the great Rebbe who wrote the Mishnah down. Shmuel and Karna have a Yosvi Aguda de Nahar Malka. By the way, a lot of these stories in the Talmud that are factual stories, are they tend to be very precise where they happen, because they were handed down with great detail. It's like Hasidic stories. They were handed down in great detail, and every detail is important to establish that this is indeed a true story and to fix it in time and place. In other words, the historical accuracy of the stories in the Talmud were very, very important to them. So Shmuel and Karna have a Yosvi Aguda de Nahar Malka. They were sitting on the banks of the river Malka. Chazinu the Maya the Kodolu ve'achiri. They saw that the water was rising and murky. In other words, this is when it floods. This is in Bavel. This is in Mesopotamia. When it floods, the water, of course, draws dirt in from the fields on the side, and it becomes murky. Okay. So he said. So they said Gava Rabba, Kosi Marava v'choyesh b'moy. So Shmuel said to Karna, a great man is coming from the west, and his intestines are aching, so the water is rising to greet him. And it's somewhat obscure what this means, but the simple answer is that it makes water available, to use, because in those days they didn't have toilet paper, so they used water anyways. So it's rising, so you shouldn't have to bend down. So Shmuel said, "I know a great man is coming." Now, what is the point? Why really do we say this? What's the point of this? Granted, it's nice that everything worked out for Rav, who had a tummy ache, but what's the point? So the answer is that Shmuel was a doctor. One of Shmuel's activities, he was a physician. So Rav had some intestinal ailment, and Shmuel knew he was coming to see him because though they were both great in Torah, Shmuel was a skilled physician. So he knew he was coming to see him because Shmuel was the best known physician. And since he knew Rav wasn't feeling well, he figured he would come to him for some help. So that's the story there. So the Marsha of Shmuel Delis, very, very famous commentator in the Talmud, points out that that's how Shmuel knew Rav was coming to him, because he was the best doctor in the area, which incidentally, we know that as far back as the times of the Talmud, our sages held very highly of the medical profession, and many of them practiced it, as did someone whose yahrzeit is today. Maimonides was a well-known physician, and some of the things he wrote about diet and parasites and
exercise,
are all relevant today. He even did some very interesting surgeries, and once freed a person from brain parasites by finding a leaf with a very, very strong odor that when you crush it, it caused the worms to
run away,
to come out of his nostrils onto the leaf. Anyways.
Tremendous.
Yeah. Amalei. No, but he has a lot of interesting things about diet and about not just exercise, but also with regards to indeed intestinal health and other things.
Most of his medical books were translated into Latin, and for generations they were used.
Yeah. And he wrote them in Arabic originally.
Yeah.
Amalei, as a matter of fact, I was once speaking, at this event, and there were different people. There was at Hartford Seminary. There were Christians and Muslims and a Jewish representative, and we were talking about how in the Middle Ages people did lots of things. They were polymaths. So this guy was telling me about this great doctor named Musa ibn Maimon. So I said, he wasn't an Arab. He was a Jew. He's one of our most famous rabbis, and the guy didn't realize. Okay.
Musa ibn Maimon.
Moshe ben Maimon.
Yes, the Rambam. It's his yahrzeit today, Ezreal. Today is his yahrzeit. So Azal Ashkechei Rav. So they found Rav. So once they found Rav, so they have to discuss Torah. Omerle. So he said to him, from where do you know? Shmuel wanted to know. Now, here's a very important thing. Even though this is part of a story, it's a bit of halacha, but it's part of a story, so we're going to study it. So here's the thing. There are many things that the sages had traditions for. In other words, this is the way it was always done way back when. But they didn't necessarily remember how it was extracted from the Torah. So it was well known that tefillin can only be written on this hide of an animal that is kosher to eat, a kosher species. It doesn't have to be a kosher animal, but a kosher species, which means to say that the hide doesn't have to come from an animal that's kosher slaughter, it has to be a kosher species. So Shmuel said to Rab, Minayim, where in the Torah do we extract this tradition that we have? She'ein kotvin tefillin, we could only write tefillin el agabe or behema Torah, only on the hide of an animal of a kosher species. Amar le, he told him, Tichsiv, as it's written, and you all do it when you put on tefillin in the morning, you say those 2 portions from Exodus that we recite, we put on tefillin in the morning. It says there, Leman tia Torah Tashem bevicha. So God's Torah, and this isn't the parsha of tefillin. This is one of the parshiyot that go into your tefillin. So Leman tia Torah Tashem bevicha. What is it written in this parsha that's in your tefillin? That the Torah of Hashem should be in your mouth. Mina muter beficha, from that which is permitted in your mouth. In other words, it means to say that only that which you're allowed to put into your mouth can that species be used for these scrolls of tefillin.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
So that's the premise. So
if it's beficha, then it means also that it was kosherly shecht.
right. So that is discussed elsewhere in the Talmud in Tractate Menachot, and so when we say beficha, that which is permitted to your mouth, it means to say the species itself, and they derive that from somewhere else. So it doesn't have to be kosher slaughtered. It just has to be a kosher species of animal. Okay, now we're going to, we have a few minutes. We're going to skip ahead to the next piece. Okay.
So that's why Jews probably learn how to hunt deer.
Well, yeah, but
they could use them
the
for
Jews in the times of the Mishnah and the Talmud, they were very skilled at trapping deer with snares, so they could shech them and eat them. We're going to learn about that soon. I mean,
Okay.
So deer have split hooves and chew their cud? Is that true?
What?
Do they chew their cud and have split hooves, the deer, or no?
Yes. All the deer
Wow.
family, antelope family, moose family, they're all kosher.
So
Reindeer are kosher too.
Reindeer?
Absolutely kosher.
Oh my God.
Okay.
Imagine how Santa would feel if
Santa is kosher.
he heard that his
Well, okay,
reindeer
so I'll
are
tell you a
kosher.
funny story about that. So so for the mall Santas, they like people with real beards. So there's a story that it's on Fifth Avenue, and all the Santas are standing there, doing whatever Santas do, and it's about 4:00, and it's getting dark, and one of the Santas gets up and rings his bell and says mincha, and they all daven mincha. Okay. And by the way, every year, so how the boys from the Lubavitch Yeshiva, they go around on what they call mitzvah tanks, getting people, stopping people on the street, asking them to put on tefillin.
Yeah.
So every year on the social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, there's always a picture of some Lubavitcher boys putting on tefillin with a Santa Claus, because apparently a lot of the Santa Clauses are Jewish. I never knew, but there's always a picture of a Santa Claus putting on tefillin every year.
Business.
So,
Christmas, it's business time.
So yes, there are a lot of good stories in that vein. Jews get up to everything. But a Jew is always a Jew, even if he's a Santa Claus. You can still get him to put on tefillin. That's the good sign. Okay, so now we are going to discuss something about what people drink. So we're going to find on page. Okay, so we are on 109b. Let me get there. And then we'll conclude with this little piece. I got to find 109b. Where did you go? 109b. There we are. We're getting to the end of this track. There's a lot of stuff in Shabbat because it's a very big tractate.
yeah.
Okay. So here's a long. Okay. So now we're going to talk about medicinal additional things. So this is hyssop. Let me make sure. Let me make sure you can see it. Okay, good. There we are. So hyssop is a herb. It's used in purification.
Yeah.
And you go ahead. Yeah, and they put. You know what they put it in? They put it in labna in the Middle Eastern cheese. You can get it kosher too. And they put olive oil and hummus, olive oil and hyssop in the middle, azov. And what it's called is umshuk. That's what this particular hyssop is called. Why do people eat it? L'kukayone, for curing intestinal disease, worms. In other words, as you know, hygiene wasn't what it was today, and very often what happened is that people got worms, and this particular this hyssop has a very strong anti-parasite quality, and when you eat it, it kills the worms or drives them out. But what do you eat it with? What do they eat it with? Bishva tamre uchkomsa. With 7 dark black dates. The hyssop itself is very strong and could damage the stomach. So you eat it with the black dates, which have additional medicinal properties, and also have additional medicinal properties, and also they also make it able to eat a large amount of hyssop without hurting yourself. How do people get worms in the first place? It comes from eating barley flour in a vessel that had the flour for 40 days since it was ground. Barley flour is wetter than wheat flour. It's hygroscopic. It absorbs flour. It absorbs water. And the combination of the barley flour and water basically makes it an inviting place for eggs to be laid, and that's what causes the intestinal worms. So barley flour is what poor people ate. So if you have barley flour and it gets wormy and you end up with the worms, you need to eat hyssop with dates. And apparently this worked. And there are a lot of traditional herbal remedies that actually work. So, and again, I wouldn't take medical advice directly from the Talmud because it might be a particular type of parasite at a particular time in history. Okay, but nevertheless, okay, and that ends. Anyone will end if anyone has a question. Otherwise, we will conclude our study. Okay.
I thought most they put did they put hyssop in cheese or?
They did, but this particular concentration of hyssop was used for medicine. But I'm sure they put it in cheese too. But it's a particular type of hyssop with a particular type of date that the combination is good for driving away parasites. Okay.
That's really good because a lot of people who ate it ended up really sick.
Well, yeah, but with the barley flour, correct. Okay, listen, everyone have a most wonderful day. And we will see you today. You're all welcome to join us yet again at 12:30 for 15 minutes of Torah. All the best, everyone.
Rabbi.
Yes, yeah,
Rabbi
Bobby,
and
go ahead.
Bob Kushner. Bob Kushner still on there?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm here.
Rabbi, I just got a call from the place. I am negative.
Yahoo!
Yes.
Thank
Good,
God.
Bob.
That's
Okay.
that negative is
Baruch
a
Hashem
base
again.
goal. We'll see you Shabbos.
Yes.
All right.
Okay,
Good,
very good.
Bob.
Very happy.
Good.
Thanks.
Very
Thank
happy.
God.
And
Okay.
everyone in your household is now doing well.
Everybody's doing good.
Give
Thank
them
God.
all my best.
I will.
Tell them
Same
they
here.
can come to show too if they want to. Okay,
I
take
will.
care.
All right, be
All
well.
right. Terrific.
Bye.
Terrific.
Have a good day, everyone.